Hey everyone, I'm back with another quick update going over some of the patch notes for Smite. This video is going to be going over the Dark Enchantress bonus update, which comes out on June 29th. This is not the update where boots are being removed. If you didn't know that boots are being removed from Smite, I do have a video about that. Sorry, spoiler alert, but that's happening. So check that video out. I'll link it. There are tons of other videos out there as well. I'm sure you'll be able to find one that's kind of going over those changes. And I will have another update notes video over that specific 8.7 update later on. But this one is specifically only over the changes that are happening June 29th, just because those are still going to impact the game, especially in Joust, specifically. So I do still have a little giveaway going on, so if you are one of the first 50 Twitch follows, you'll be entered to win one of 2 awesome chests, and if you're one of my first 50 YouTube subscribers, you'll also be entered to win one of 2 random awesome chests. So if you like my content, I appreciate all feedback, all comments, likes, shares, subscribes, whatever you do, I do appreciate it. But that's enough of that. Let's just hop into the notes themselves. I'm going to skip over the skins because that doesn't change the game too much at all. So I'm just going to go over the first items and then the god changes specifically. The first item that's being nerfed is Soul Gem. So you can see it's decreasing the bonus damage from 30% of your magical power to 25% of your magical power. And just as a reminder, this is only on that passive ability where you hit 4 stacks. That next ability that damages an enemy is going to do 30% right now. As of the 29th, it's only going to do 25% of your magical power to each god hit. So a little less effective. 5% is still kind of a lot, actually, when you think about at the end of the game how much you can hit and how many people you can hit with abilities as a mage. I still think this is going to be a viable item for sure on gods like Tiamat, on Merlin, where you have the ability to spam the 4 stacks a lot more often because you have stance switching possibilities and you just have more abilities that can hit more often. But if you're not one of those specific mages, you may want to look at other items. If you look at the price here, 2,300, a very similar priced item is Pythagorean's Peace. At 2,300, you get less magical power, obviously, so 40 compared to 80, but you do get a little bit more health, and you do get 10% magical penetration. So being that Joust is quite often a double tank meta, having that 10% penetration early in an item for 2,300 is actually really good. So if you're on a god that you don't think can abuse the stacking of Soul Gem and getting that damage off more often, you might want to replace that with Pythagorean's Peace. Bancroft's Talon, a little bit more expensive, but you do get more lifesteal off of that, and you get some mana. So these 2, I think, are good replacements for Soul Gem. Typhon's Fang is just a little bit expensive for Joust, and you usually need or want other lifesteal items paired up with Typhon's Fang so that magical power increase by twice the amount of the lifesteal you have is just, it makes more sense with other lifesteal items. So that's the change for Soul Gem specifically. The next item that's being nerfed is Karen's Coin, decreasing magical power from 90 to 80. So let's look at that one. So right now it has 90 magical power. It's going down to 80. If you look at the price on it, 2,400 compared to Chronos Pendant, 2,700, Tahuti, 3,000, and Doom Orb, 2,850. You can see that this is the cheapest item, so I don't think that only taking 10 magical power off is going to make it any less attractive, especially in Joust. You can get this on early. You can hopefully get those 8 stacks where you get more HP5 and MP5 at the Evolved Karen's Coin. Plus, I think the MP5 just right off the bat and HP5 right off the bat are really, really nice in Joust and kind of underrated. If you're healing or generating more mana than your opponents, it's just you're going to find yourself in more beneficial situations. And then on top of that, just thinking about HP5 in terms of global healing, if you're building HP5, the enemy team won't often notice that you're doing it, so they won't build anti-heal items. So then you're going to be getting all the benefits from healing without having the enemy team know about it, at least if they're not paying attention, right? Some people will, but building HP5 is kind of a way to get around some of the anti-heal items specifically. So again, still a cheap item, still can be built early in Joust, and is still going to be good, even though it has 80 magic. Is the Stone of Gaia, decreasing max health restored from the passive from 15% over 5 to 8% over 5 seconds. So let's look at that one. 2250, very, very cheap item. You get 25 HP5, you get 15 MP5. The only thing that's changing in the patch is that this 15% is going to go down to 8% over 5 seconds. So that's only going to happen when you're hit by a knock up, knockback, pull, or grab, which is obviously beneficial, but with all of the other stats that this item provides, regenerating 0.5 of your max health every second, 400 health, 25 HP5, 15 MP5, kind of the same reasons I just talked about with having HP5 and why it's important. This item is still going to be built. It's still going to be important. Thebes is obviously a really, really good item in this tree as well. Mail of Renewal, not as good, has its uses, I think, but at 2400, Stone of Gaia is still just better overall than Mail of Renewal. And then Shield of Regrowth is definitely very, very situational. You need to be able to heal yourself to get any sort of benefit from this item. So Stone of Gaia, still going to be good, even though it has a little bit of a nerf on the passive itself. But just thinking more about the HP5, MP5, and why those stats are important is if you're doing something like sieging a Phoenix in Joust, let's say, and you skirmish a little bit and you have to back off, the other team has to back off, you're healing because you have HP5, they don't have HP5, maybe they have to go back to the fountain, right, a little bit. So that 5 to 10 seconds that they have to go back to the fountain, or one person has to go back to the fountain, and you're healing, now you're able to go back in sooner than they are. Maybe you can take the Phoenix with a 3v2 instead while someone is back in fountain. There are just a lot of applications where HP5 and MP5 are important, and MP5 obviously, when you're building up mana passively, you can get more abilities off. Not more abilities off, but you can last longer and do more abilities over a longer period of time because you're sustaining that mana when the other team may not be. So still build this if you're a tank, still going to be good. Now, some of the god changes. Morgan Le Fay, the newest god that was released, very, very powerful. One of the highest burst mages in the game, I think, right now, from what we have experienced in Joust, specifically in casual games, increasing the cooldown on her Sigil Mastery from 10 to 12 seconds. That is going to be, it's good, I think. Her Sigil Mastery is the ability that has a fear, it has a slow, and it has a clone on it. So just not being able to spam that ability, especially late game, it was up almost so often that she could eliminate 1 or 2 people from a fight every 7 seconds, right? If she has 30% cooldown or 40% cooldown, which is just, it's too much for a mage. She's obviously fairly immobile, so that I get why they did that, but not going to be able to just spam that ability quite as often. I don't know if it's going to be enough to really cut down on her damage, but I think it's a step in the right direction, and obviously she's not going to be in ranked in this next update either, so you're still going to have a little time to make sure that you practice with her or play against her enough that you know what she's good at. The next nerf that's happening is Persephone, so her Harvest and her Flourish are getting nerfed a little bit, increasing the cooldown on Harvest from 14 to 15, decreasing bite scaling from 40% to 35% on the plants when she sends the plants out. Decreasing the scaling on her Flourish from 65% to 55% as well. So I think what Smite is trying to do is lower some of her burst potential as well with the recent rework. She does a ton of damage all at once in this specific, how she's reworked now than she did before. So if she hits you with an ult, she puts her 2 on you right now. She hits you with the 1 and then flourishes away. That's going to kill most squishies, and it's kind of a low skill ceiling combo. Obviously, she has to hit you with the ult, but just I think they're trying to make it a little harder for her to get so much damage off at one time. We'll have to see if this changes anything. I still think she's going to be a ban in Joust because her plants can take up literally the entire lane, and you can't get away from them. They go over walls. Good Persephones are going to be very, very oppressive. So I don't think this is going to change that too much. I still think she's going to be in one of the first 6 bans in Joust for sure. King Arthur decreasing, literally nerfing all of his abilities. As you can see, they're the same at the beginning levels here: 60 and 60, 60 and 60, 100 and 100. But what happens is they're decreasing some of the scaling on late game. So this one's doing 20 less on overhead slash at the end of the game, 20 less on hamstring, 20 less on sundering strike, and then 40 less on his ultimate, and less percentage HP damage on his ultimate as well late game. These changes, I'm sure, are more centered around Conquest specifically. I just don't think he's that good of a Joust god. I think why he is good in Conquest is because he can solo farm. He can get ahead of his whoever he's playing against in solo. He can take their farm and kind of roam around the jungle pretty safely. Whereas Joust, you're always fighting. It's almost always a 3v3, and there are just too many things that the enemy team can do to disrupt what King Arthur wants to do. Plus, you also have hard counters like Artio or anybody with a cripple, Ares. So I just don't think he's a very good Joust god at all. If you're playing him, he's going to be even worse late game. And I don't think he does very well early game in Joust. So I don't know if this doesn't have too much of an impact specifically on the Joust game mode, but maybe you're a King Arthur main and you disagree with me, and that's completely fine too. But personally, I don't think this is going to have much of an impact at all. He's not played very often, and I don't think this is going to change that. Cuchulainn, his Berserk, decreasing the bonus health shield he gets from 10 plus 20 per level to 10 plus 10 per level, so halving that per level bonus on Berserk health shield. And then Spear of Mortal Pain / Warcry, which is his ultimate ability. Spear of Mortal Pain in his human form, Warcry in his Berserk form. Decreasing the base damage on that at all levels, it looks like. So 30 less damage at the very last level, 10 less damage at the first level, and increasing the cooldown from 85 to 100 seconds on Spear specifically. The cooldown on Warcry is not going to be increasing, and that's just because it relies on him transforming, and so that's still going to be the same. But what this does is it doesn't allow those Cuchulainn players to spam the double ultimate combo that they want to get off, right? They want to be able to ult and then hit them with his other abilities, and then transform, ult again, hit him with the abilities again. So he's going to have less of a chance to do that because his spear is going to be, he's going to have to wait 15 extra seconds on that spear, which is pretty significant. But in Joust, I still think Cuchulainn brings so much early game pressure that he's still going to be a pretty top pick. I don't think he's a ban necessarily, but he's one of the warriors that we find ourselves going to fairly often. Him, Achilles, Guan, Osiris in certain situations. But those are the ones, and then obviously Cuchulainn, like I was saying. So that's not going to bring him, I don't think it's going to bring him down in Joust specifically. Just going to have to be a little bit smarter when you're ulting, because you're going to have to wait 15 seconds to do it again. Sun Wukong, Master's Will, which is his second ability where he swings his staff in a circle and slows, decreasing the base damage at the later levels, so doing 20 less damage at his fifth upgrade on that ability. I don't think it's going to really affect him in Joust too much. I think Wukong is a sneaky pick kind of in Joust. I think he does a lot of things well, and you can use him in a utility role. With his bird, he can fly around the map very quickly, very safely. With his tiger, he has a ton of kind of one-person damage that he can get off and just eliminate one person from a fight in Joust, which is pretty important. And then Ox is obviously just very safe and has knock-up and just a lot of utility there. And then another underrated aspect of Sun Wukong in Joust specifically is his ability to help siege. So if he goes into his ultimate, he has the clone who's kind of attacking, leads to a confusion factor for the other team, and also able to block 1, 2, 3 tower shots at a time so that you can help siege those towers and phoenixes a little bit easier. I think they nerfed him just so he's not the 100% go-to in Conquest, but that change is not going to really affect him in Joust specifically. Gilgamesh, dropkick, fixing an issue where his ability does 15 additional base damage and 15% power scaling till the gods kicked into a wall. So this was a bug, apparently, where his dropkick did more damage than was expected, or it was even supposed to. So more of a bug fix than a nerf, but his cooldown is also increasing from 14 to 16 seconds, which 2 seconds is a pretty big nerf actually, and 14 seconds is already a long cooldown. So at 16 seconds, you're just going to have dropkick up way less often. So it's important to use it well. And then Winds of Shamash decreasing the initial damage at the later stages of the game. So he's doing 20 less at the final upgrade there. Gilgamesh is still good. Right now he's kind of on our ban list depending on what we want to play. But having a extra 2 seconds on his dropkick, which is kind of the ability that you want to play around on Gilgamesh 100%, is going to hurt him. I think he may come out of that ban list for us. But if you still have a hard time playing against him, there are still a ton of walls in Joust, and you can be kicked into them kind of at any point, right? The lanes are small enough, and the jungles are small enough where a good Gilgamesh does have the opportunity to kick you into wall and stun you for quite a long time. So I guess make this decision yourself, but he's going to be a little less potent in this next update because of that specific cooldown. And then in your head also just know if he misses a drop kick, he's very, very vulnerable for that next 15 seconds, 16 seconds. All right, so Soul. This one is a little bit harder to explain, but look, watching the patch notes show how they explained it was, yes, they're adding 0.1 setup time or 0.1 second setup time to the activation of Stellar Burst and adding a 0.2 post-fire time to Stellar Burst. But in the last change that they did for Soul specifically, there was an unintended effect where the basic attack fired almost immediately after the Stellar Burst. And feedback from players said that they liked that feeling. The problem is it was a little bit too instant. So instead of completely reverting the bug and making the setup time, the post-fire time, and the ability time go back to that initial very, very, not long, but longer period between those things happening, now they're adding a 0.1 second and a 0.2 second post-fire time and a 0.03 to 0.06 second delay to the basic attack fired. So it was an unintended bug that made Soul get an unintended buff, and now they're basically keeping that unintended buff, just adding a little more time to it. So technically this is a buff. Soul, I think, is still very good in Joust. She's safe. She has the ability to clear. She can do a ton of damage with her ult if she has a good setup, or if they're in a lane and running away, you know exactly where they're going to go. But I also think she uses items like Pythagorean's Piece very, very well too. So with Soul Gem getting nerfed, this item I think is going to be built more, and she uses this item almost better than anyone else I can think of. So maybe like Ares, but you're not building Ares full damage in Joust either, so that's kind of tough to say. But like I said, I think she's gonna be good in Joust. Mage ADCs are kind of sneaky right now. I see Chronos doing pretty well in a lot of high rank streams, so keep Soul in mind for sure. Giannis decreasing his base damage from 300, so he's keeping the 300 at the first level, and then the scaling is going down at every other level, and decreasing that magical power scaling from 75 to 65 the further it goes. This change I don't think makes too much of an impact on Joust at all, just because his ult isn't as impactful on a smaller map. Yeah, sure, it does a ton of damage, but you can't necessarily sneak a Phoenix or sneak a Titan or anything in Joust. People are just, you're too close quarters, they're going to know. A good Giannis is still going to be good in Joust, so slippery, tons of walls, able to kind of avoid damage, get in, get out, do the damage, and leave. But this isn't going to drop him in any of the rankings, and it's not going to shoot him up in any of the rankings either. So I think this is kind of a change that doesn't really affect him too much in Joust. Just know that his ultimate doesn't quite do as much damage. And then Raijin, Percussive Storm increasing the cooldown from 9 seconds to 10 seconds, and the Raiju decreasing the mark duration where it's scaled before from 4 to 6 seconds. Now it's only going to be 4 seconds duration at all ranks. So I think Raiju is actually the bigger nerf here. You really kind of work around that ability on Raijin specifically, and now having 2 less seconds that it's on an enemy in the late game, it just doesn't feel that great on Raijin. His early game is still going to be good, so don't fully discount him. And increasing the cooldown Percussive Storm from 9 to 10 seconds, I think it's probably a good change, just because I can't think of another ability on mages, a damaging ability like that is up every 9 seconds itself. So 2 nerfs for him. I still think he's going to be good, especially early game. He's going to still bring that pressure that you want in Joust, but just know that late game you're not going to hit quite as hard or have Raiju lasting quite as long in those team fights. So still viable. I think he's still one of the top half mages or top quarter of the mages that you can pick and be successful with. So that's it. That's kind of not very many changes, but they're still important to go over these and know what's happening. This is going live on June 29th. I will be doing a full rundown of the 8.7 mid-season patch notes. That's going to be a much longer video because there are a ton more changes in that, including the boots being taken away. So I'm sure that's going to be take up a little bit of time from some of the things that I've learned even since they made that first announcement. So keep an eye out for that. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, if you learned something, comment below, leave me some feedback. Give me a like, give me a subscribe on YouTube, follow me on Twitch. I don't stream as often on Twitch necessarily. If you're looking for more educational content, YouTube is going to be where you want to subscribe to me on. If you want more gameplay, live gameplay, and you want to interact with me and ask me questions, then definitely follow me on Twitch. But I appreciate everyone taking some time to watch. Hope you learned something new. And I will see you guys next time for the mid-season patch notes. Thanks.